We're going to be talking about a word called intentionality. And I do a lot of teaching, do a lot of talking to a lot of people in the career that I'm in. And for the last 20 years or so, I've had an opportunity to talk about this topic quite a bit. So I've got a format. Let's go ahead and roll. Let me just introduce myself. Those of you that are watching this for the first time, my name is Ryan Chamberlain. I'm sitting here in my home in Central Florida, and been married 24 years, have a wife. You see my children in the back. I have 4 awesome boys. They range from 21 to 17 to 16 to 13. We kept trying for a girl. That's how we ended up with 4 boys. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to help a lot of people with things that have been taught to me. It's been kind of just, I guess, the gifting or whatever I've been able to develop into. And I'm going to begin to even reach out more and pass on some things that I've learned. I wrote a book back in 2010, summer 2010, titled Now You Know. It's the first book here. And that's the title of this particular series. But we're going to be talking about influence. And why did I pick the word influence? Why do I kick that off? Well, let me go ahead and share with you the definition of the word influence: the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something, or the effect itself. So when we're talking about influence, I believe, I wrote down a couple of words here today, and we're going to open it up for questions. If questions come into the comment section, I'm doing my best to answer some of them live here today. We're not going to go very long. But as you're coming on here and you're catching a hold of this, why would someone want to be influential in their life? If I go back 20 years or so ago, I don't feel like I really had a lot of influence. But I've developed some over the years. I don't think I'm that great of a person. I'm a pretty normal person. But I began to study people that I respected, and I noticed that people were listening to them. They had a following. They were able to have an impact. They were able to make a difference in this world differently than the average person. And I always wanted to know what made that special. Well, it boils down to a word: influence. John Maxwell talks about leadership and influence as being equivalent. Leadership is influence. And I dare to say that those in this world that choose to expand their influence are going to be more fulfilled in a lot of areas. For example, if you're in a sales business, having more influence is a good thing rather than not having influence. You want to have influence over the team you're building. If you're in the team building business, if you're in the volunteer business, if you're in the organization, if you own a company and you have employees, the way you conduct yourself and the way you have influence. If you are an employee, having influence within the employee workforce only opens up doors for you that other people won't see. They won't get those doors. People that learn how to develop influence oftentimes are viewed as lucky or hey man, that person just gets it all. But really there's specific things in here that they're doing. And I'm a believer that we can uncover those together. I'm a student. I want to learn. I want to be better. I read. I think that's part of what developing influence is all about. But in just about every walk of life that would be watching this particular or listening to this particular conversation today, developing influence and that being one of the things that you value in life. Hey, I'd like to have more influence. Now, not manipulation, not tactical. This influence comes from the true influence that I'm talking about comes from becoming a person that's influential, becoming someone that people want to follow. And that's a challenge for all of us to develop into that. So this is a show for influencers. Now you may say, well, I don't influence a lot of people, but you're an influencer if you're going to take the time to watch the show because you're going to develop that. You want to develop that. And I want to challenge you to become an influencer in this life, to become someone that influences people for the positive good of everything that you would be doing. So I notice we got several people coming on here, several people watching live today. I'm excited that you're here with me. Jump over into the comment section. Let me know you're out there. If you are listening to this audio, you can watch it live on Facebook. Of course, I'm going to rip the audio. It's going to go into a podcast. Some people like it that way. It'll be on iTunes. All this is being set up as we speak. Of course, it'll be on YouTube and it'll be live here right on Facebook. And so you kind of get to pick the way that you want to get exposed to it. But this is an open forum when you're on Facebook, so you can ask questions. You can jump over here. Lorianne says hi. She's jumping over the comment section. Just let me know you're out there. As I hit something that resonates with you, maybe shoot me a note, and it may take a little bit to get this going, but go ahead and like my page on Facebook. Go ahead and set the setting on Facebook where you get notified when we go live. My plan will be to go live every Friday at the same time. Occasionally I'm speaking at events or doing things just like you're doing out, and I may shift the time around. I'll let everybody know in advance, but you can kind of plan on it, and so you can watch it live or watch it afterwards. Or if you're on iTunes or YouTube, you can get notified that particular way. So I want to invite you to connect with me. You can always go to ryanchamberlain.com, get connected there through email. I like to give away books. I like to do things like that, so you'll be able to check that out as well. So, and if you're watching live with us today, go ahead and jump in the comment section. Let me know you're out there. So today's topic is intentionality. Becoming intentional about what we do. As we get focused on life, as we get focused on those people that are highly successful in this world, and we begin to study who they are, and I'm going to be interviewing some of those on this show throughout the weeks to come. This is one thing you'll notice in common. You're going to notice that people are intentional. Successful people are intentional, meaning they don't leave things up for chance. And this has to become something that you learn how to control with your time and your intention. This is not something that I want to even act like I'm totally mastered. That's not what this shows. We're talking about this. I seem to have progressed in this area. I seem to live my life more intentional than what I see most people living, but I haven't arrived. I'm continuing to want to be more intentional. By most standards, I feel like that I'm heading down the path and have headed down the path, track record of what many people would call success. But I'm not arrived yet there. I'm still pursuing success and that definition of it, which is more than just money, way more. I'm not even thinking about money right now when I'm talking about it, although that's a piece of it. But when I'm talking about intentionality, and if you're coming up with questions, go ahead and shoot this over. I've written down 3 areas that I believe the highly successful, the highly influential person, the person at your job, the person that owns the company that you respect, the pastor of the church that you respect, the anyone that's leading people or having influence or that wants to have influence. There's things that they're very intentional about, which means they have to block other things out of robbing their intentionality. And I want to convey this to you, that there's a lot of blocking that goes on for someone that wants to control their destiny and their success. They can't let this world attack them, their time, even things like social media, rob people of how intentional they could become in many other areas of their life. And we're going to get there. Matter of fact, next week's show is titled No More Distractions. No more distractions. We're going to talk about how, I'm not saying I don't get distracted. I'm saying, however, that for us to arrive the goals that we want to hit, where we want to be in life, do I have the amount of influence that we want? We got to get rid of some distractions. So we're going to talk about that next week, but intentionality is kind of the precursor to that. We want to be intentional. And so I'm going to give you 3 things to be intentional about this week. And one is, the first one will take me longer than the other 2 to talk about. One of them is goal setting. So what I've noticed through the years that I have worked with leaders, high performance team builders, high performance people that I respect, that get the job done, that are influential, for them to be successful by the definition that we're going to talk about on this show, which is not just money, but many other things, They're intentional about their goal setting. They might not even think of it as goal setting. But I want to talk today about 5 areas of life that if we become intentional about them, that's really what goal setting is about, is becoming intentional about proper goal setting, more areas than just one. You don't want to just be intentional about money because you may lose everything else in life. But you don't want to be intentional about other things and not be intentional about money and be broke your whole life either, but have fun in other areas. So we want to be intentional about many things. So I've written down in goal setting, here's 5 areas. Some people talk about 6, some people talk about 7. Matter of fact, in my book, my most recent book, I talk about 6 areas. I co-wrote that with a mentor of mine that's the most intentional person I know, a guy by the name of Tony Geary. I think you got to be intentional about your health. You got to be intentional about your relationships. You got to be intentional about your financial situation, which would have to do with your business and your finances. You want to be intentional about your spiritual life, and you want to be intentional about your personal life and the goals that you have personally. Now, we're talking about goal setting. The people that I respect, the people that I want to interview on this show, are people that I know are intentional about many areas. Now, it doesn't mean that they're perfect in all these areas, because I'm certainly not. But it means they're pursuing intentionality in these areas, to the point where they don't have time for a lot of nonsense. Most successful people I know don't get caught up in the nonsense of the world we're in, with the exception of goofing off here and there. But you know what I'm talking about, absorbed. Most people just don't have time to be successful, ladies and gentlemen. Most people don't have time to develop influence because they're being distracted. I'm getting into next week's session when we talk about no more distraction. But health, if we're not intentional about where we're going with our health, we're going to probably arrive somewhere we don't want to arrive. And I think that many people understand this. If we're not intentional about our relationships, that would include marriage, children, friends, best friends. If we're not thinking this stuff through, there's probably going to be areas that we want to adjust because some problems are going to surface. This happens to everybody, ladies and gentlemen. The more intentional we get about them, though, the better. And the people that I respect that are goal setting are setting goals about how they're going to be intentional with their finances, net worth goals, business goals, how much savings. I promote Dave Ramsey. I like Dave Ramsey, his plan. The whole idea of that's an intentional, systematic way of getting focused on our finances. And that's what I mean by intentionality. So your spiritual goals. I'm guessing there's all kinds of walks of life that are going to end up watching this over time. On this show, we're going to talk about this. But, if someone's not intentional about their spiritual life, my guess is they may not have one. Okay, that's their prerogative. But if someone really wants to develop it, you almost have to think about it. What are the goals I'm going to set? What am I going to focus on this quarter, this month, this year? And the most successful people I know are intentional about these areas. And then we look at personal goals. So I said health, relationship, financial, spiritual, personal. What's that personal goal that you want to focus on? What's something you want to do? A few years back, I wanted to write my first book. That was a personal goal. I didn't know if it would make money, didn't know if it would. It was just a goal of mine. You may have personal goals. You may have similar goals. My point is becoming extremely intentional. This is what it ties back to. It ties back to influence. That's the theme of this show. It's a show about influence. And as we want to become influential, as we want to become like and develop into the people that we respect, then that is what that type of goal setting, what I'm talking about, is really what intentionality that leads to influence. So the next area of intentionality that I want to talk about is a big word called values. Now, about 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, I was reading the back of a Franklin planner. And I'd never done that. I'd started to learn how to set goals. And this is early 20s. So I'm a few weeks will be 44. So that you can kind of do the math. So early 20s, I had never asked myself, what do I value? And you know what? Here's what's interesting. Work with a lot of people that I know don't ever really ask themselves what they value. And because they don't know what they value, or they haven't defined it, or they haven't really crystallized it, the world ends up pulling them in all kinds of different directions because they're not intentional to match up with how they're going to spend their time. They're not deciding how to spend their time based on their value system. Most people decide how to spend their time reacting to things that are thrown at them in this life. And I'm not saying you know, occasionally there's things thrown at me. You got to react. I'm not saying don't react, but don't live your life in a reactionary mode. That's not what an influential person does. We're talking about intentionality here. So in the back of this Franklin Planner, it said, okay, what do you value? List your top 10 values. Since then, I've come to develop an understanding that, sometimes you value more than 10 things, but narrowing down your top 10 values. I've got this value sheet in the back of one of my books. This is page 258 of the Becoming a Strategic Networker. I got this from Tony Geary. There's 50 values. And I challenge you to go through and write, you don't have to use this book, but go through and write down things that you value. Who you are. What is a value? Value is who you are, what you believe, how you live your life, at the root of what you really care about, what you want to spend your time doing, really doing, not what you're actually spending your time doing, but what you really want to be doing with your time is a good point to what you value. And so on this show, we're going to talk a lot about values, but here's what I'm going to tell you. In people that are intentional, people that have influence, they're underneath all that influence. They're beating to their own drum of values that have been developed based on, how they were raised, who their parents were, what type of church they go to, who they let influence their life. And those values can change and move through life. But here's my point. If your goals that we've already talked about are not in alignment with your values and they're pulling you in a different direction, there's going to be constant conflict in your life. And that's not being intentional. And influential people, as we work on this and continue to strive to become influential together, I want to pass on best practices. I want to introduce you to people. I like doing this. I have fun doing it. I've been doing it in a private setting for several decades now. I'm going a little bit more public as of the past year with this. So you could say I'm just getting started with things like Facebook Live. And we're going to roll with it and have some fun, and who knows where the show will go. But becoming intentional about what you value begins with writing down what you value, and then don't let your goals get outside of those values. You got to do the value test every once in a while, or you're probably not being intentional. You're letting everybody else manipulate your time. Last thing I want to talk about today, in intentionality, that I see the most successful people that I work with being intentional about. And this is something that I think is challenging for a lot of people. But you got to wake up every morning and be intentional about your attitude. And I've noticed that attitudes if we're not careful, they can be like roller coasters. They can be, up and down, around and around. And those that are highly influential don't seem to have that roller coaster effect, meaning they're predictable. People, even though they may have problems and things going on behind the scenes, their attitude and who they are that's projected on a regular is very consistent. So that if something's off, it's off. If someone's always high or always low, and you can't ever tell what's really going on because you just know they're hit and miss. They're kind of wishy-washy. Influential people are not wishy-washy. So that is a philosophy. That's a development of a focused type attitude. Hey, Wayman, thank you for coming on here. Wayman Reed, new subscriber from New York City. We got New York in the house. Thank you for being on here. And I know many of you maybe listen to this. We're just getting going on this Facebook stuff. So new to me. I know it takes a little bit to get the traction going, and we're going public with it. So if you're just listening to me live or watching live, jump over to the comment section. Let me know you're there. And if you've caught a hold of any idea or topic today that resonates with you, ask me a question. Put something in the comment section, and on future shows, we'll try to get those answered. But it's attitude. Influential people have an attitude. I'm not saying it's a perfect attitude all the time, but there is a positivity. There's an optimism around influence, meaning nobody's attracted to negativity. You're not going to be influential if you, the people that I don't know of anybody that has a really negative ongoing attitude that they portray to everyone that really is able to maintain influence. And we have to recognize that. I mean, it's hard for people to see themselves. Very few people see themselves as, hey, I'm a negative person. But the reality is they got to step back and ask themselves what's going on up here. And they may have to recondition. They may have to realign their values. They may have to realign their goal setting. A lot of times we can get a bad attitude because of who we're spending time with, because of the fact that we're not focused, because we're not feeling like we're progressing in life. And when we're engaged in forward motion of things that are in alignment with our value system, we're hanging around people that are supporting that value system. We're setting goals based on that value system. We're then becoming intentional in probably a way that most people don't. And that's what makes you stand out, ladies and gentlemen. In my opinion, I'm giving my opinion here. This is, your opinion can be on your show, I guess. Mine is going to be on this one. I believe that that's what makes somebody intentional. And that's being intentional, consistent over a long period of time with the right things is one of the defining qualities, if not the biggest defining quality of influence. We all want influence. We want to develop. We want influence in all of our, if we're a volunteer, if we're an employee, if we're an organization, we're team building, if we're working with anybody, if we want to have an impact, if we want to make a difference, it's probably going to be done with people. And so there's going to be some influence. We got New Hampshire. Alan, thanks for being on. Appreciate the comments in there in the section below. Please share this particular episode on Facebook. They got a share button there. You can share it, get the word out, spread the word out. It'll be happening next Friday at 3 Eastern. Again, we're going to talk about no more distractions. I want to end today's session doing something that I'm passionate about, and that's promoting different companies that do different things, but they do things for the sake of benefiting the world. It's called social business. And I'm going to, one of the ideas I have is to talk about or brag about a company per week that is doing good. The one that kind of kicked it off for me to understand it, I had never heard about this company till a few years back, but Tom Shoes. So I'm going to talk about Tom Shoes today. They're the first one that I'm going to talk about regarding social business. And there's really hundreds, if not thousands, of social businesses out there. And a social business is basically a business that is dedicated to making the world better through the sale of its goods or services or products. Tom Shoes developed a concept called 1 for 1, where every time you buy a pair of shoes, they donate a pair of shoes. And it took them a few years. They founded by a guy named Blake Mikowski, 2006. And it was just a simple idea. And it took them years to get their first, 7 or 8 years to get their first 1 million pairs sold, which meant they donated 1 million pairs. But this model started to catch on, and it's created a wave of doing good in the world through business. And so I believe you should go buy a pair of Tom Shoes. I've got a pair of Tom Shoes right here, a little bit dirty. I'm not trying to show them off. I love my Tom Shoes. You should grab yourself a pair of them, maybe wear them and support, because every time you buy a pair, they give a pair to a kid in need. If you Google Tom Shoes, go to Wikipedia, you can read all kinds of stuff about it. Tom's does other things as well, and I didn't realize they did all this. They sell eyewear. They sell coffee. They sell apparel. They sell handbags. And everything they sell is tied to doing good in the world. And so I just want to give kudos to Tom Shoes because they're doing good. This past year, they broke the 60 million. Just in the last few years, they've sold over 50 million pairs of shoes, which means they've donated 50 million pairs of shoes. They have helped thousands and thousands and thousands of people have better eyesight through selling their eyewear. They give water to, on behalf of their coffee that they sell. So if you're going to do business, I'm going to encourage you. This is the one of the things I want to do on the show is encourage you to start thinking about and becoming aware of social businesses. You can buy many things that you're using on a regular basis from companies that are doing good with natural, clean products. And I'm telling you, the more you dig into this world, the more we can together make a difference. And I want to thank Tom Shoes and Blake Mikowski for getting this wave going. I know they weren't the first. I know that, and we'll recognize other people, but they've made this a big deal from a marketing standpoint and tied it together and have set the path for many other companies so that this world's becoming a better place through business. And that is intentional, my friends. So that's why I'm, influence. We're talking about influence here. And we're talking about making the world a better place through purpose. So that wraps up today. Next week's show is going to be titled No More Distractions. I'm going to give you some best practices, some ways to get rid of the distractions in your life, to stay focused, to be able to hit your goals, how you have to think. And again, this is a big component of becoming an influencer. We are going to be interviewing people on this particular show from time to time that are influencers, people that obviously have learned how to stay focused by eliminating distractions. We're going to be talking about intentionality. We're going to be using these words. So, hey, if you're just now catching the end of this, watch it from the beginning. Shoot your name into the comment section. If you're listening to us on the podcast, share this, like it, and we'll see you on the next episode. God bless.